Life, Loss and Legacy is a general information podcast only. This does not constitute professional advice as we simply don't know your individual circumstances. If you do have any questions, please be sure to contact the guests of the episode. It should also be noted that the opinions expressed by the guests and host of the podcast are theirs alone and do not represent the opinions or perspectives of their employer or any other associations. That's enough warnings. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to Life, Loss and Legacy, a PlanningSolo podcast for people that are working in those first 3 years after losing their partner. My name's Jordan Vaka. I'm an independent financial advisor with PlanningSolo, and I'm joined today by Lisa from Orium & Co. Lisa, thank you for joining us.
Jordan, thanks for having me.
Lisa, give us the very quick rundown of who you are, and then we'll talk about why you're here.
Okay. So I'm a property advocate. I work both in the vendor and buyer advocacy space, so selling and buying right through Melbourne and the Mornington Peninsula. My background is real estate. I was in residential sales for many years in Boroondara and the inner city. And then I exited the industry when I had 3 boys, found it a rather toxic space to be in as a woman and as a mother. And I ended up supporting and coaching and mentoring people going through major transitions for a number of years. And then I decided that I could dovetail the two, that I could bring back in the coaching and the residential sales, but come into a space of advocacy rather than going back into a residential agency. Because I really, really feel very passionate about helping people go through selling a family home or buying whilst they're also going through another major transition. Hence the reason we're having this conversation.
Exactly right. And that's why I've asked you on, because I think that overlap of that emotional awareness and comfort around dealing with transitional phases of people's lives and the real estate side, it's very unique. There's not a lot of people that do that. It's kind of one or the other. And I think what we're talking about today is the sale of the family home following the death of a partner. And it is a very sensitive and a very delicate topic. So I'm looking forward to exploring that with you and getting your insights on that. Because we can talk about the numbers, we can talk about the property. That's not what it's about.
So much more.
So the 3 areas we'll be covering today, we'll start off with just what are some of the reasons people might have for selling their family home, and there's a bit of a range there we'll explore. We'll talk about some of the challenges, fears, and benefits that people also experience while they're deciding to do that, and how that spectrum can evolve as they move through the process. And we'll also pick your brain for a few tips and traps for people when they are looking to start the process and things to avoid as they're going through it. So let's hop straight in. We'll get straight into it.
Great.
I'm keen to hear, Lisa, in your experience, when people have lost their partner, they've lost their husband, what are some of the reasons that drive them towards then selling the family home?
So one of the key reasons is that they are wanting a fresh start. They're wanting to actually move on and start a new chapter. But there's also the other end of the spectrum, because often that can keep them in the home. Yeah, because they're afraid of this. They're afraid of leaving behind those memories. They're thinking that they're forgetting about their husband in choosing to sell. But that is one of the key reasons, is actually, the grieving process. And the grieving process, as we all know as humans, is not linear, and there's no boxes to it starts now and it finishes now. But often there's a process in which a woman has gone through a big part of that grieving process, and they arrive at a point and they're like, well, actually, I want to start this next chapter. I feel like I'm ready. And that is one of the key reasons.
And I get the feeling that, this is anecdotal, but for people that are going through that process, it is almost like a fork in the road, and they decide, okay, I need to stay in the house to honor the memory of the life that we had forever, sometimes for far too long. Or I need to have that fresh start. And how do I bring that memory structure with me? Do you see many people sort of coming across, or that are having to sell, that are doing it for financial reasons?
Yes, some. Yes, and that can also be tied in with whether the property is fully in her name or not. That can be one of the reasons. Obviously, if there's still a mortgage on the property, which can happen. And she's unable, she's not in a position to be able to service a mortgage. And that can depend on age group, but it can also depend on where she is with her employment. So that definitely does happen. I find personally it tends to be more so the emotional aspect so it's that involuntary reason that has people choose rather than being forced to.
And it really echoes. We've had Arwen Dropman, who was a decluttering expert on the podcast before, and she was talking about how memories can be embodied by items and locations and places. And that can be a real burden or it can be a real relief. And every person's experience of that is so unique. You mentioned if the house isn't fully in their name. Are we talking beneficiaries putting their hands up? Is that something that can strike and make the house need to be sold?
Yes, it can. It can. And then it also depends on the confidence of the woman to be able to potentially stand up to family. So if family members can pressure their mother to want to sell, and they're not always for, I'm not even going to say bad reasons, but it might be because they don't believe that she's going to be good living where she is and that she is not going to be able to maintain the property and the upkeep of it, or they want her closer to them. That forced pressure can, depending, as I said, on her level of how she feels within herself, whether she's able to stand up to the family and say, well, actually, no, I want to stay, or basically be influenced by family members around them, because this time for a lot of people, they're in a place of being highly influenced,
and it can be explicit.
They're afraid
pressure.
of making the wrong decision. They're afraid of making the wrong decision,
and so in that case, they will often delegate that decision to somebody else, who's normally the more powerful personality in the family. I think
that's exactly right.
Or sometimes they freeze, and I mean, I'm guessing if they're frozen, we're not necessarily going to see people in that boat. But if you come across many people that have just kind of head in sand, frozen, and you've had other people kind of bring you in to talk about selling the house?
So generally, we're not being called necessarily in. It hasn't happened very often when they're in that place, or we'd be called in by a family member to come and speak with. But as we've found, I mean, that can be a long process. Like and selling a family home in this instance, it can be a long drawn out process, because we might go and speak with somebody who's lost their loved one and the family, or not the family, and it might take a period of time for them to be ready, but they're really gathering information. Have I just answered your question or not?
No, absolutely. And it leads into my sort of follow-up and this is a hypothetical, but say you were brought in by a beneficiary and, mum needs to sell the house, she won't listen to us, can you come in and talk to her? This is a hard one. How do you bridge that gap where you may factually understand, yes, it needs to be sold, but she's just not ready? How would you approach something like that?
Such a great question. So, and this is where I say my coaching comes in, all those years of coaching. So understanding humans want to be validated. They want to be validated for what they want, what they desire, what they think is going to be the right choice. So if I was in that position, I have been in positions where family members haven't agreed, is how can I be highly impartial, which I am. That's one of the things that I bring to a situation like this, is how can I be highly impartial and hear what's at play, validate where each person is coming from, so they can see that they're seen, heard and understood, and then help them discover a win-win for all. And it is many conversations, Jordan. It's not just one conversation, and there's not one answer. It's more so being able to sit with people with such presence and know the questions and really hear the words behind the words and what is actually at play. Because ultimately, often the kids are thinking they're doing it for their mother. But if they realise that actually it's in their mother's best interest, and she has all the things that she needs to do to be able to support herself in the home, if you're able to shine light on that, then they are able to see that, and it might be just a longer drawn out process.
And I think by that stage, how do I put it? Families communication, in my experience, about 80% of it is background noise. It's all just assumptions, and no one really listens in a family. You kind of fall into your patterns and your systems.
Totally.
And having somebody sit down and actually listen and explore the topics is such an eye-opening experience for so many families. But I think at the risk of upsetting our friends that are real estate agents, That's not the experience that a real estate agent's going to bring, is it? They're looking for the deal.
And look, as I've shared with you, my ex-husband, who I adore, and I think he's one of the best agents. We've talked about this, and he said, "Lise, I'd be happy for you to be involved because I know that you're going to be taking a large part of the burden that they're not wanting to do." So, their skill set on the whole is being out in the world. It's connecting with buyers. It's meeting buyers. It's vetting buyers. It's all of that. It's sales focused, and it is essentially it's transaction focused.
Yeah.
All of this stuff goes on in the background. The number of decisions that need to be made from the point of before deciding who to sell with, all the way through to sale and settlement. There are so many decisions that need to be made in the home, whether that's with the woman, whether it's with her family, but there are so many that an agent often is not going to want to, because that's going to take them away from what they do best.
As you know, we have done a lot of family law work in the past, and even on the estate side, lawyers are very similar. They don't, some do, like, let's not paint with too broad a brush, but they want to practice law. They don't want to practice psychology. And I think it's kind of a similar experience for people on the agency side. But I've just realized as well, we've kind of just brushed over what a vendor advocate is and not really expanded on that. And people listening may not be familiar with the role. So can you kind of walk us through the nuts and bolts of what a vendor advocate does?
So I'm going to speak from our experience as vendor advocates, because vendor advocacy can be anything from you engage a vendor advocate to help you select an agent. It can be as simple as that, and then they're out of the picture. We provide a holistic, because we want to be able to walk beside that person to ensure that their interests are at the heart of all decisions. Right through till the end. So what that means is that we are engaged with choosing the agents to come in and interview. We can manage all of that, so she doesn't actually have to have anything to do with that. We can interview the agents, advise on
Sorry, let's not understate that. Like, they don't have to be in that sort of roll call process. That would be very appealing, I imagine, to quite a lot of people.
Yeah, it's especially in these situations, these highly charged situations where somebody's lost a loved one. So that is something we love to do, because, as you know from me, I build relationships very quickly. I know who to be trusted. So I know which agents that are going to be the right fit based on each client. And so then I source those agents. I will then interview them. We receive the proposals, and then we advise based on the proposals. If there's something that we like or don't like, then I can go back on her behalf and negotiate the terms, for example. I also know, because of my background in real estate, I know what the best strategies are, and I know the key to pricing. And pricing is something that is so critical. I've lost business because I've advised for pricing to be lower based on the value that I believe it's worth. And I know some of these properties end up passing in because they've gone with an agent that tells them what they want to hear. And then if you miss the mark on pricing, you've spent potentially thousands and thousands of dollars on marketing, but also the emotional toll it takes in taking something to auction and nothing happening.
Well, particularly when it's the family home, that's a rejection of the value of the family home.
Yeah, but also the work, the emotional, mental, physical that goes into taking something through that whole process. It is huge. So we're involved with all of that. We advise on the staging, so what actually is worthwhile, because what you want to say is, if you're going to spend money on staging, you want it to potentially double what you're going to get, what you're going to realise in the sale price. As far as repairs, that's also another thing on a home-to-home basis, on what is actually valuable and what's going to set the house up to be in its most optimal state to present to the market for, to open up to as many buyers as possible. And so all of those are on an individual basis, but we certainly don't come in and say you need to spend a couple of $100,000. That rarely, in fact, that's never happened in my time. I know somebody recently who's doing that, but they've got a very, very expensive home, and it was a modern home, and they need to do that. But on the whole, it's not something that we would advise to do. And so we're right through. So when the open for inspections start and buyers start coming in, everything comes via us. So the communication from the agent comes to us. So we are that one voice, we're that consistent relationship for them, ensuring essentially that the agent is sticking true to their word and they're doing what they say. And all the way through, as I said, to advising them on the price and the value of what they end up being given and whether or not they choose to go with that. So we are there 100% of the time with them, ensuring that they, as I said, that their interests at the heart of all the choices, all the decisions.
If I can say, I think you skipped over one of the really valuable pieces you do. I mean, you mentioned it, but the idea of having one point of communication rather than having the agent texting or phoning or emailing somebody who just may not really want to handle any of this. It must be such a relief to have somebody that they can trust and rely on rather than their email just dinging all the time. Like that, I think that's really, you can't quantify it. It's hard to explain, but I think that's really, really valuable. With your services, I think the natural question is how are you paid?
So it comes out of, and some owners are like, how does that work? It comes out of the agent's fee, out of the agent's commission that's negotiable. Of course, and so we say, okay, there's no extra cost. There's no extra cost to somebody in engaging us. Yes, potentially the agents will put up their fee fractionally, but we're not talking a lot. And we don't know how much, but we know from working in the industry what is actually fair, what is a fair and reasonable fee. And we will go back to an agent. If an owner is not happy with the fee, we will negotiate on their behalf.
And I think, I mean, if I was thinking about if I was an agent and I had somebody doing a lot of the emotional heavy lifting, I think it'd be worth it. I mean, I can't imagine they're all happy about it, but I think that'd be quite worth it if you looked at the work and return equation.
Yeah. Look, the really great agents, I say the great agents, who are not in a space of lack, they say, like somebody said, something of something is better than nothing of nothing. And when it's a good client and they know that they are being well supported in the background, I think it really comes from lack. I really think. And that on the whole is very much the industry, not generalizing, but it is.
Yeah, it's a different mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Let's move on to the kind of second tranche of things to have a chat about. And one of them is just trying to get an idea of what the challenges and the fears that people have before they go into the process. But the benefits, like there is a reason that some people will benefit from doing this. In your experience, what are some of the fears that people commonly hold, walking into this idea of selling the family home?
Are they going to know what's a good price? How are they going to know? When's the right time to sell? Who do they trust?
That's a big one.
It's a massive one. Who's going to do the right thing by them? How am I going to be set up well for the next home? How long is it going to take to sell? What do I need to do to the home? Do I need to do too much? Am I going to have to move out? Can I stay? Where do I get all these services? Like, who's going to help me?
Yeah. And I think, one of them that pops to mind is if you've been in the family home for a long time and that's where you've raised the children, perhaps, I imagine there must be a fear that somebody's going to come in and say, this is all horrible, get rid of it all, you need to strip out anything that meant anything to you. That would be very confronting for some people, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So it's the way that you prepare them for these conversations, yeah. So preempting it, having a voice that's sitting them down and saying, this is not personal. Just know that when somebody comes in, they're going to be advising you. It's about helping you realise the optimal price. And in order to do that, to help you realise the optimal price, there are certain things that you may not feel comfortable doing. And I totally get that, because I do get that. And that's where somebody that you just mentioned or somebody that we know in our community, Adrian, can come in with that emotional lens and really support people to know how to help them declutter or prepare a house for sale. Yeah, considering their feelings right through the process, because it is.
I think that's really important, that consideration of the bigger picture. Like we're saying, there is that distinction between the quantifiable and the qualifiable, the head and the heart. And I think that needs to be, speaking as a financial advisor, it's not something that a lot of us have done very well. We focus on the numbers and then all of a sudden we have to deal with people, and that can be quite confronting for a lot of advisors, I think. let's come back to that, the kids, and worrying about what the kids think about the decision. It is such a hard path to navigate in that regard. When push comes to shove, do you find that somebody that decides to keep the house over the objections of the kids, is there regret? Is there a really torn kind of opinion after that?
There can be, yes, there can be. And I suppose that's another conversation. There's so many conversations, Jordan, to have with, in this space. So there's another conversation to go through in making that choice. What are going to be the ramifications? What may eventuate for her in making that choice? So really, it's like we talked about this before, with having a plan, and knowing, if I choose this path, what are the things that I'm going to need to address? Am I going to be okay with it? Is that worthwhile and worthy of my energy and my time to make this choice versus this other path?
Okay, cool. So there are challenges, there are fears that we have as we navigate this process, and it can be very hard to let go and very hard to move into that next stage of life. But to bring it to a more positive note, what are some of the benefits that you've seen from people that have experienced these big changes?
Well, they get a new lease on life. Honestly, it is like I say, that chapter's closed, but it's actually a book. Yeah. But you get to bring that book with you. You get to bring all the memories, all the experiences, all of that life that you had with your husband or partner. You get to bring it with you. But all of a sudden, they've got there's freedom, and so there's new interests. There's potentially travel. There's hobbies. All of a sudden, they've freed up in their lives to look after and do what actually lights them up, what is fulfilling for them. So that's a huge one. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of parallels on the family law side and people going through bereavement. And so I'm keen to hear your take on that new lease on life. Does that often come with guilt?
I see less of that now, Jordan.
Wonderful. That's so good to hear.
I see less of that. Yeah, because, I mean, mind you, a lot of the people that I've worked with and know, they have support whilst they're transitioning through it, whether that be therapists, psychologists, other, it might be meditation, yoga, all the things. So it's not just this happens and then I am here. There is a lot of support. I'm a big believer in really bringing people, giving people all the support that they need whilst they're going through something big like this. So when they get to this other side where they're actually have sold the family home and moving into a new home, they're a different person.
And I feel like you saying that you see less of that now is such a positive thing. I suspect part of it is we all talk about this stuff more now. In the past, it was something that was kept hidden and we didn't talk about these feelings. But to see people be able to embrace a new lease on life, that's amazing.
And I think if you've gone through it, as you know that I've been through my own separation, and so I understand grief. It's not something that I shy away from. I'm very, very familiar with it. I've worked with many people going through it. So I also I know how to support people insofar as bringing the people in to support, because that's the key. For a lot of people that haven't grieved, that are afraid of grieving, that are looking for other ways to distract themselves from it, they don't move on. There is no lease in life. They might change to another home, but they're still dragging the old stuff with them. That sounds a bit harsh, but it is the truth.
I see what you're saying. So they may change their environment, they may do the mechanical things of selling the house, but if they haven't actually worked through the grief itself in whichever form it takes, they just carry it with them.
That's right. And guilt can be a huge one, because for most women, that's something that we just we inherit. Oh, and it shows up, and it keeps showing up at times.
I really like that perspective, though, that selling the house and it's kind of blown my mind a little bit, because it's feeding into this whole idea of this entire podcast series, is that if you treated any one of these topics in isolation, yes, you will solve that particular question, but you still have 1,000 that have been unanswered. You do need to take a more holistic approach and find the people you can trust to navigate you through that. You mentioned an interesting point there that you're there to support them through the process. But at the same time, you're also there to make sure they do move through the process rather than stagnate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, but if you're not addressing and you're not realizing that you're in grief, then that's actually taking your energy to actually not be able to move through. So if you've got support to be able to help you understand grief, feel it, navigate, work through it, then you're actually going to be in a far better position to be moving through it and making choices to move you through it.
Or else you're frozen. You've got your head in the sand and it's all too hard.
Yeah.
Would I be right in saying, and I'm kind of just out on a limb here, but that grief, the family members who I feel like I'm just villainizing people's family members. But can they sometimes say, like, they impose their own version of grief or their own expectations of grief onto their mother or onto the person they're meant to be helping, and that can taint the process a little bit?
And this is where understanding family dynamics, yeah. And again, going back to we're all humans. We've all got our own stuff that we bring into every single relationship and every single situation. And how can we validate each person and understand that's your experience, but ultimately we're here for your mother. And that's where having somebody like me in the space that has the skill set to be able to do that and is also highly objective, but understands humans, and humans need to be validated in their experience.
That's such a powerful
validated
point.
And then we separate, yeah? So we validate, we acknowledge, and then we come back to the person at the heart of all of this, which is your mother. We need to look at what is in her best interest. So sometimes it's advocating for the mother with a family.
I think that is such a brilliant structure. The validation piece, that's kind of hitting a bit close to home, if I'm completely honest, with some stuff that I've seen. But that's such a skill to have, to actually validate. Because, I mean, I have this picture in my mind of, the eldest son, I'm the eldest son, telling mum what she needs to do and how she should be feeling and what needs to happen. But if you can insert yourself in between that and almost shield her from that while still validating him, that would flip that dynamic around and let everybody focus back on what is right for mum.
Mm-hmm. And just speaking to that, Jordan, because, I can share this, but generally, men are the fixers, yeah? They like to fix. They like to come in and fix it. But as a woman, most women don't like that, and especially in a place like that, yeah? They don't want to be fixed. They want to be collaborated with. They want to be communicated with. They want to be asked what it is that they want, yeah? So more questions, more openness to, here's my mother, what does she want? I've got all these ideas. I want to just help her move through it. But is that for her or is that for me?
The intentions are the same. Their heart's in the right place, but the approach is contradictory.
Yeah, it's not other-centered, really, is it?
Yeah, it can contribute to the issue. And again, that idea of family dynamics, most of the communication's, 80% background noise by that stage. Doing it on your own it's not going to be a great experience. It's going to impede your ability to move on to that next stage, all of those things. So bringing in a trusted third party to help you navigate that. Talking about that new lease on life, and they can start experiencing hobbies, or maybe they've moved from a house that required a lot of maintenance and now they're in an apartment or things like that. Could you talk a little bit about, like, does that give them a greater degree of clarity over what they want from life?
Well, because this process does, because it frees up a lot. When you unburden yourself from something like that, potentially a big resource, as well as now you're single, you're not in partnership, you've got a lot more space and freedom to actually focus on what it is that you want for your future. And so I think that's a big part in really supporting people to come through this, is to actually have a plan, again, and a vision for what they really want for the rest of their, for that next 10, 20, 30 years. And that's something that all of a sudden they can see more clearly, because with the sale of the home behind them, they can focus on that. And what does that look like? Do I want to travel? How do I want to spend my time? What matters? What matters to me now that I don't have? I mean, is there potential for another partner in time, or is that a closed door? All of these things. There's that the close of the selling of the family home really does free up a lot of time and energy for that next phase.
That's something that's not really thought about very much, I suspect, because it is a weight that you are carrying so long as you're in that house. And you may carry that gladly or you may carry that, sadly. Um, but yeah, so moving on releases a lot of that weight.
Mm.
And you'll still be sad. You'll still carry that with you, but you just won't be dragging such a heavy weight behind you.
And I know it's different because I'm divorced, not widowed. But I've talked to many, and there is a similarity in the sense that when you're living in your family home, you're constantly being reminded of the memories you had as a family, or in their case, in a relationship with their husband who's no longer there. And that is that constant. You cannot get away from it.
And then when you do, with the sadness and with the acceptance of what's happening, you are able to lean into that new life, which will be different. It may not be as good or may not be what you wanted, but it is a reality. And the quicker you embrace that, the better you'll be starting off. I think we've gotten very deep and meaningful for what a lot of people might be thinking as a property discussion.
Well, that's me, and clearly it's you and this is what we're talking about. It's humans. It's like looking after humans. It's like, loss is deeply painful, and so how can these people be looked after and supported and respected and questioned as to what they want? What do they really want, and how can we as professionals help women through this process to empower them, dare I say it, empower them for the next phase of their lives.
And particularly, I think this is ground that hasn't been very well tread by our respective professions. We've talked about that before, but I think it is an opportunity to do things a little bit differently and leave people feeling good. Sad, but good
better,
after this has been done.
Almost better. I want to say better, and I think it's still possible. That's something that I often am told, that people feel better for having had an experience or a relationship or working with me. Better. That's my vision and mission for life, is for people to be left better for having known me.
What
and that means that I genuinely care about them, and it's not me, it's them.
And I suspect anybody tuning in thinking they were getting something like The Block has probably dropped off well before this.
Yeah. Oh, well, they're not for us, hey?
Exactly. They're not going to get much help from what we talk about. But let's move on to the third area I wanted to cover. And this is probably some of the more practical advice and tips that we can get from you today. But some tips and traps for people looking to start this process. So I guess first port of call, what are their options when they are looking to sell the property? Like what paths can they head down?
So obviously there's a number of different strategies that they can use for selling, and that is the one that everyone seems to know, which is auction. You can go through an auction campaign.
Which is big in Melbourne, isn't it? It's not as big around the country.
It's pretty big in Melbourne, yeah. But more so, there's also a lot of more expressions of interest that has come into play for the bigger properties. And then there's private sale, and then there's off-market. So there's 4 options.
Can I pop in there? Sorry, Lisa. Can you walk me through what an expression of interest is, please?
It's basically the same, but there's as an auction campaign. So they're still open for inspections, but at the close of an expressions of interest, people put in their offer. So there's no public auction. And sometimes what will happen, that those offers are not, the owner will not accept any of those offers. So it basically continues on. It can continue on for a while, but that's the same with an auction.
Mm-hmm. Is that a one and done when you put in your offer, or will the agent come back and say, oh, you're $100,000 shy of the mark?
Depending on the agency, they're all very different, It depends on their formula. So if it was, say, one of the agencies that I would work with, if there was something that was very close, we would contact all the buyers. We would say, okay, there's an offer that's not acceptable. This is the offer that the owner would accept. Who is willing to meet that? And if we've got a number of people that are willing to meet it, then it may end up going into a boardroom auction. There are so many different variances to the way it can happen. It may be that there's one standout buyer, we contact the other buyers, they're like, we're out at that level, and it might be a process of negotiating with the person that has actually put in the offer that's closest to what they'll accept. Private sale.
Private sale.
Yeah, private sale. And off market. Yeah, so there's a property that is sitting that they don't want to go through any of the process, and they engage an agent, and the agent will look at their books as to who might be available for them to take through. Because most agents will have buyers that they're looking after. Yeah.
Okay.
They'll have a database, what we call hot buyers, people that we're looking to put into property. And so the agency would look at all the potential hot buyers and whether there was anything that could be matched to the property that was being looked to sell. So that's an off-market.
Why would somebody go an off-market transaction?
Because they don't have to do open for inspections. It's very quiet. They may not have to do the level of work that they have been advised to do. Yeah, they may not
you don't
necessarily
have to do photos and things like that.
No, well, yes, but they may not do the level of repairs to what they might do in order to put it to market, the time frame, and also the privacy.
That was the only reason I could think of, but I thought that says more about me than anything else.
Yeah, no. I mean, so there's all of those reasons, but yes, privacy is one for sure.
Okay, so
but then there'll be many people that will say, well, we wouldn't know what would be acceptable, and we want to see what an auction campaign will realise, yeah, because you'll never know. But I'm very much a believer. You've got the perfect buyer and you've got the perfect house for you. There's a perfect match there. If you find that buyer, you don't need to go to auction. You just need to know what their level, what their capacity is, which you do by asking questions and watching body language and knowing. You just need to know what their capacity is and whether they're able to, to find the common ground where there's a win-win. Because the thing is, the owner's saving on marketing, potentially staging repairs, and so that would could be factored into what they may accept.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be a very left field question. Again, I'm villainising the children, but say you've got a know-it-all kid. I'm saying as a know-it-all kid. We don't need an agent, Mum. We'll do it ourselves. Is that a sensible approach?
Well, unless you are well versed in the market, in the area, and I'm going to say this hand on heart. I mean, I say this with kindness. A lot of people have an inflated idea of the value of their home. Yeah.
Yep.
It does happen. And so if you've got that and you're putting it to market with an inflated, you're going to, miss the market. People sell it themselves. Yeah. You're probably not going to attract the buyers that you would want to. Or, as I said, you're going to miss the market because you're going to have it priced too high. I'm a big believer of staying in our lane. Like I know that there's certain things a lot of things I can't do, but I know this is what I do well, and I stick to my lane, and I engage other people to help me in the areas that I can't.
Well, my comparison is travel agency. So yes, I could book my own flights and find my own accommodation, but it drives me up the wall, and I always think there's a better deal that I've missed, and it just turns into the spiral. So just see a travel agent; they know what they're doing. Like yes.
I love the support. I love people helping. If somebody's great at what they do, why would I try and do that? And also, it's my time and energy that I'm better spent in doing what I'm really great at.
Especially at such a heavy moment as well. So so if anybody's saying they'll do it themselves, or you can just do it yourselves, don't listen to them.
Think again.
Speaking of which, for our widow who is going through this process, who are some professionals that they should be talking to, and who should they be listening to?
So a conveyancer, absolutely. Financial advisor, yes. Accountant. Property lawyer, maybe, depending on the property and the situation.
So there's like easements and caveats and things like that.
Encumbrances, yeah. So I've covered accounting, financial. Obviously, estate agent or advocate. Somebody to help with staging. Somebody to help with the decluttering or getting the house prepared, because staging can often be different to decluttering. I mean, it can sometimes they bundle it together, but it depends on the level of work that would need to declutter for sale. And then obviously maintenance. So painters, plasterers, cabinet makers, gardeners.
Is that somebody agents would be a good introduction point for?
Yes, absolutely. Normally when you've got somebody that is a really good agent, they will have their own network.
Yep.
But the problem is a lot of these people are tied up. So it's actually having access to, say, your accountant might have, or for example, an advocate may have a big network, or you might have an agent, you might have a financial advisor that knows. It's really about choosing the right people around you, and they're all going to have somebody that they're going to potentially know that's going to be able to refer you. That's the way I look at it. It's not necessarily an advocate's job, but I certainly have, as we've talked about, as you know, I've got a very good network of people that are liked, known, and trusted.
I think it's like a hub and spoke approach. Pick your hub, build out your really trusted people that you're close to, and then trust on them to extend that trust to appropriate people.
That's exactly right.
Finance a suit.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You mentioned staging. So a question that I do have, what are your thoughts on staging a property, and what would you say is an appropriate investment to make as a percentage or as a dollar amount?
Yeah, it depends. Say for a 3-bedroom, it's around $6,000 or $7,000. It can be fully.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking a full staging, and a lot of houses are not fully staged. Yeah. For something that's a big family home, it can be up to $20,000 for a significant home. Now, do I believe in it? Yes, I do, for the right home, and depending on what the home, depending on what the furniture is like and how it's presented.
So let me throw some house values at you and pick your brain, a bit of a pop quiz. A $500,000 3-bedroom house. Do you think it's worth staging, potentially?
It's not a one answer to that, yeah, because it depends on the position. It depends on what their furniture's like. Yeah, that's a key part. It depends on, are they looking to put in a couple of pieces and keep theirs, and is that actually not going to be great? That won't work well.
And that's where you would be working with the staging expert.
That's right.
Navigate.
Yeah. Yeah.
$3 million family home.
Yeah, well, it could be $20,000.
Yep. And I think you said earlier you would want that to double in the return. So you'd want to get $40,000 back.
Absolutely.
With the staging, this is such a weird kind of logistical question. How long do you have the stuff for?
Well, it depends. So normally it would be for an auction campaign. So let's say you had, so it's for generally 4 weekends. So it would be put in, but it would need to be put in a couple of weeks before that for photography and videography if that was taken, and floor plans, etc. So it would be done then. And then it's generally taken out, booked for just after the auction weekend. What you can do in the quieter times, often staging companies will give you a bit of a discount and a bit of extra time if you need it after the sale campaign finishes. So generally it's about 6 weeks that you would have it.
Okay. And I pride myself in asking silly questions on this podcast. What happens if something gets damaged during the open for inspection? Like, that would fall on you, the homeowner, I assume. That's okay. Like I say, random silly questions. 43.
That's never
30.
happened, Jordan. That's never happened, and I don't know the answer. That's never happened ever.
I love that. What I'm learning from this episode is that you work with much better quality people than I'm used to in my life.
Oh my gosh, that has never happened. Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
Yeah, I just let my Dandenong shine through, I think. And what happens if somebody trashes your toy?
Oh, so cool. Good.
All right, we will cut that. We'll cut that. I've
Sorry about that.
Somebody walking into this process and they've made the decision, okay, we're going to sell the house. What's a reasonable expectation in terms of the time that's going to take, do you think?
So it depends on what needs to be done to the house to prepare it. Yeah. So let's say there's repairs that need to be done and so forth. It might be a 4-week time frame in order to get the trades in and to do the work. Then you want a 2-week lead time. So once the house is ready for sale, then you want a 2-week lead time for photography, for ad copy, for all of that being finalised before the first open for inspection. So you could be looking at up to 10 weeks.
Yeah. And that's by the time you have an offer you've accepted.
That's right.
And then you go into the settlement period.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So 6 months would probably start being a bit excessive, do you think?
That would be long. Oh, well, because with a family home, depending on the family home, if it's somebody that's going to be upsizing potentially, they'd be looking for a 90, 120-day settlement. And potentially, and also for somebody, unless she's bought, she's going to have to give herself the time frame to actually buy if that's what she's wanting to do. So she's going to be wanting to probably be giving herself 120 days, 90 days minimum.
Yep.
Unless she's got somewhere that she's already, as I said, already moving to.
Yeah, it's going to complicate that process. Lisa, I think we've covered all of my questions and everything I wanted to cover. Is there anything you think we've missed? Is there anything that you think people need to know as they're embarking on this journey themselves?
The only real thing that just the thought that popped into my head is, money can be the thing that actually, or the dollar amount can often be the thing that sways people. What they hear from an agent. And what I would say is be really, really careful with that. Be very mindful that, yes, whoever is saying what they're saying, that they have really given you the comparable sales that you trust. And also in saying that, to ensure that you get if you weren't going to use an advocate, that you have at least 3 agents that come through, or say not at least, say 3 agents that come through to give you a variance on price, because going with the agent that's giving you the top price is not often the best option. It might sound great, but that will mean that then they're either, because if it's not worth that, which it often isn't, often, I say, not always, but not often, if that is then their strategy is based on that price, then your pricing strategy may miss the market, which is then, as we talked about earlier in the episode, is going to take them to a process where they're not even necessarily going to be able to sell, or the agent's going to be coming back and conditioning, communicating, having them to come down on price. So that is probably
to the price that they were quoted by the other agents.
Potentially, yeah. I've seen it so many times. I saw it so many times when I was working with my ex-husband. So many times we missed properties on price, and I can't tell you, honestly, 8 times, maybe 9 times out of 10, those properties passed in. And they ended up either coming back to us in time, or they had to meet the market.
And so that's a tactic to get the listing, basically.
Yeah.
So
and I'm not saying that. I don't want to dispute it, because I'm sure there are some agents that give a price and they're afraid to lose the listing, so they'll get it at any cost. And the reality is, it is possible. You can take it to market, and maybe it is. And so some agents will do that. They'll say, "I'll take the listing on," because you don't know. It's not. You don't have a crystal ball. That's exactly. It depends on, somebody might value a property. The price might not seem right, but somebody might place a value on it that you couldn't have seen. But that's probably the main thing I would say is, just be very, very careful when you're looking to make a choice. If you're looking to make a choice based on the price that the agent's given you, it can be dangerous.
As you were saying, that, something else popped in my head. The costly, yeah. On the marketing front, what are some of the ways properties are marketed? And I'd like to hear your thoughts on kind of, would you rank them in a hierarchy of what you would definitely spend on and what you would maybe consider optional?
Yeah, I for most properties, I would only suggest digital these days.
Yeah, okay. So no sign at the front, no.
Oh yeah, sign at the front. But I'm not talking the local magazine, all the things that can cost tens of thousands of dollars, because honestly, for most agents, it is just ego.
Brand building, I think I've seen it described as.
It's not about the client.
I don't care about your brand. I just want to sell my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So digital is real estate, domain, apps.
That's right. And obviously the agency, yeah.
And then spend the money on the good photography.
That's spot on.
Do you think video is a good investment when you're selling your house?
Depends on the house.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
If you're trying to hide it, you don't want video.
Sorry?
If you're trying to hide some flaws, you don't necessarily want video.
Yeah, and some just don't video well. It really, until you've walked through a home, you won't know. And obviously, it's about making sure that every bit of money that you spend, that it's going to maximise how it appears and how it's marketed.
We've talked sort of roughly around staging costs. Do marketing costs sit in the same ballpark, or are they wildly higher or lower?
10,000 plus ish, around that. Yeah. For the
for a full
for
campaign.
full digital. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's good to know because, again, I like asking sort of basic questions because I think a lot of people have them and maybe they don't feel comfortable asking them, and I don't mind looking silly.
You're looking silly. You are far from silly, Jordan.
Thank you, Lisa. It's very kind. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed our chat. I think it's been really educational and really useful for people that are embarking on what could be the biggest transaction emotionally and financially of their life. If people have further questions or they wanted to sort of run anything by you, where's the best place to reach you?
So either my website, you can contact me at lisa@orium&co. Will you put this in the show notes? Yeah,
Oh, will be
awesome.
nice, yep.
Obviously, our website, oriumandco.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn if anyone wants to find me there. Or my contact number, I'm happy for you to put that on if in the show notes if you want to include that as well.
Will do. Fantastic. Thank you again, Lisa. And thank you for listening to another episode of Life, Loss and Legacy, a Planning Solo podcast to help people navigating those first 3 years after loss. My name's Jordan. I've been joined by Lisa. And until next time, we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.